The Americans say they're withdrawing from Iraq, and it seems hard to believe. They just went in and killed a couple million people, spent trillions of dollars, and then they leave and forget about the place. Is it? It's not. There's hundreds of thousands of contractors still there, aren't there?
Yes, there are still thousands of contractors still in the country, mercenaries, and there's still a few, I think, 100 in the green zone, 100 American soldiers in that big embassy in the middle of Baghdad. So I know it's hard to believe that they have withdrawn, but I don't believe it's by choice.
So
So
you really think Iraq gained the independence and strength to kick the Americans out?
Not exactly either. See, Iraq is not independent. It's just sort of moved from American control to Iranian control at the moment. It's the Iranians that have muscled away the Americans and taken over influence over Iraq.
Right, right. That's been spoken about for quite a while. So it must be in Syria's advantage now to have an Iraq under Iranian control.
Um, well, Syria has always wanted an independent Iraq free of American occupation. But I think it's fair to say that because of Syria's alliance with Iran, Syria stands to gain from, at the moment, having control over Iraq by proxy with Iran.
Well, I mean, I'm curious about the military logistics. How it will strengthen Syria in a military manner. I mean, can weapons now be supplied from Iran to Syria through Iraq?
That's a very good question. I can't say I'm certain. I actually don't really believe that there was any problem transporting weapons in the first place. So I sorry, I've just been receiving a piece of paper here. Apparently, Syria just tested a missile over Iraqi airspace. So
What is your prognosis, your prediction for the situation in the whole region, Syria, Iraq, Turkey? I mean, is it going to be a big war, or is it going to pass peacefully? Is the Syrian government going to collapse, or what's going to happen?
I think we're at a crossroads. Um, it's either going to be a stalemate or it's going to be World War III. Because you have Turkey, which is part of NATO, and it's got the missile defense system that's targeting Russia, and then you have a new um, military treaty with Australia, with America, which will increase the amount of troops in military bases in Australia, and that's targeting China. Now, China and Russia feel threatened, and Turkey is not an ally of Syria. It's like Syria's enemy number one at the moment, and I think it could be cause for it could be the reason for most of Syria's strife. So Russia has gains to stand with Syria, has gains to make. So by the US and Israel's assault on Syria, they are antagonizing not one but two superpowers, Russia and China. So this could end up as World War III. Whether or not the Syrian government is going to fall, personally, I don't think so. This has been going for 10 months. If the Syrian government was going to fall, it would have done so by now. Frankly, I'm really surprised that the Western media's assault on Syria is continuing. I would have thought they would have given up by now and cut their losses. But they seem insistent to have their plan succeed, and that is to destabilize Syria and to create an insurrection there, Libya style. So I think it's been long enough to say that their plans are just not going to be a success. No matter what they have tried, it's not working. The question is now whether or not they're going to admit defeat and give up, or if they're going to just, as they did with Iraq, just pull all the plugs and attack. And then we might see Iran and Syria jointly attacking Israel. And I'm not sure what Russia and China would do in that situation.
Yeah, I mean, I see the Twitters, the tweets, and like Sana, the official Syrian news agency. I mean, there's a steady flow of martyrs being taken to the cemetery, you know, soldiers and security personnel. There's a lot of killing going on. It's pretty bad, isn't it?
Well, it's certainly portrayed as worse than it actually is by the Western media, but I'm not going to say it isn't bad. It's definitely bad. There are quite a lot of uh, not militias, gunmen crossing the borders from Lebanon and not so much Turkey anymore, but it was at the beginning. And they are contributing to the deaths and the body counts of both soldiers and obviously the gunmen. And I think we're going to continue to see a stream of bodies until the enemies of Syria stop their attack. I also read a report that said that some of the rebels from Libya who were against Gaddafi's forces were coming into Syria. And this is something from the mainstream media. And they did say that they met up in Turkey with the I believe it's called the Syrian National Council, the new you know, Libyan National Council style American shills in waiting for their slice of power. So they all met up and had a party and talked about how they were going to have Libya's rebels come across to Syria and start killing people and trying to create an insurgency there, which it's not really working so far since it's been 2 months already. We are seeing bodies, unfortunately, but I don't think it means that we're falling into a chaotic black hole.
I wonder what role a woman can play in this situation. I mean, it would seem that whatever nationalism patriotic Syrians had, it's probably been strengthened. But I mean, are women in the military? What role do women play in supporting their country in Syria?
Syria, women have the exact same rights as men in terms of the military. There are women in the Air Force, there are women in the army, and they are in frontline roles. They're not just like supporting roles. So, in terms of what women can do, women are just as patriotic and powerful as the men in Syria.
Is there a national draft?
Well, that is one thing that differs. The national draft is a 2 years military service, and that is only for some men who are part of the families who have more than one son. So the draft is it's not really a draft, it's a military service. A draft is like when you're going to war. But I think Syria's military is large enough that that won't be needed. I can't really say what may, what would happen if we are facing a war, whether or not a draft would be instituted. But women are not compulsorily obliged to participate in the military service. I will say, though, that this has stopped 4 or 5 years ago. Before this, in every single high school, it was compulsory for both females and males to learn how to shoot and learn military commands and basic training, military training in high schools for both genders. So
Wow.
both men and women are very well capable of firing a weapon and fighting.
So, just to finish off, is there anything that I missed? Is there anything you'd like to introduce or add to what we've discussed regarding the topical events in that region?
I'd like to just say that although what Iran did in pulling the Americans out is clever, at the end of the day, you know, it was the Iraqi resistance that was the sole reason the Americans were able to leave, were able to be pushed out of Iraq, because they basically gave Iran a bullet at which to point at the Americans. Without the fight of the Iraqi resistance, there would have been nothing for the Americans to fear that Iran would drape over their head. And I just would like that point to be made.
And the Iraqi resistance really refers to the Sunni element, doesn't it?
I'm referring to both elements, both
Okay.
Sunni and Shia.
Okay.
And when I mention this Shia resistance, I don't just mean the Mahdi army. There are other Shia resistance groups, like the Band of the Righteous People, or in Arabic, Nasab Ahl al-Haq.
Well, there's
So,
Sadr's who is famous on the Shia side, Muqtada
well,
Sadr.
sure, but you have to remember that even after the 2007 treaty that he had with the Iraqi government, that would say he's not going to fight back. At that time, the American surge was going to decimate his army, but he had a treaty. Even after that treaty, there was still IEDs and attacks up until the last day of the war, and there are other Shia resistance groups in Iraq that are not under control of either Iran or the Americans. I think that should be noted.
There are bombs today in Sadr city and other Shia places.
Well, I think that the point has to be made also that the war is hardly over. There is still fighting for their independence there in Iraq right now.
Okay, well, thank you. I mean, I don't
Thank
know
you.
what you mean by their independence. You mean to get Iran off their backs now?
Basically, yeah. I mean, I think that Iraq and Iraqi people have their own country and their own interests, and that should be looked after by them. And Iran's influence over the country, it might be beneficial in the short term, but in the long run, it needs to be removed. It should be a friendly alliance only. It shouldn't be one a super over another country.
I read that Nasiriyah there was twin car bombings and one suicide bomber, and they were all aimed at Shias in different locations.
I think we all know from the very beginning that the Americans have been playing the old game of divide and conquer, and that involves setting up car bombs in rival groups. And the plan, if you read the news reports closely, from 2003 onwards, the plan has been to divide Iraq into three: Kurdish north, a Sunni middle, and a Shiite south. And even how do you say, the constitution that they drew up just directly shows that they wanted three separate states, but they settled on three separate federations. Um, and it's always been part of the plan. In 2004, Iraq had a united resistance. Um, People from the Mahdi army were sending troops to people in Fallujah, and vice versa. Fallujans were coming to Sadr city to train Mahdi armies. It was a united front, but the Americans saw to it that after sustained car bombs in marketplaces and civilian targets, that the resistance would have nothing to gain from, number one, killing their own people, and number two, alienating their own people. After such a sustained bombing campaign, they managed to convince someone out there that the opposite sect is their enemy, whether it be Shia or Sunni, and that's all it took to make a fake civil war into a real one. And this is continuing even now. The Americans are sore that they have been had to leave Iraq after so many of their troops died. Not that they care very much about that, but there was some blood lost, and mostly there was some money lost, and now their power has been lost. So they're still sore about that. And I think what they're trying to do is, if they can't have Iraq, they're trying to remove Iran as well. And the way that they can do that is to destabilize the country and play off both sides, just as they always do.
Yes.
And I think this car bombing is exactly an example of that.
Well, I read like there was a big mosque bombing, and this was many years ago in Iraq, and all the press and media said, or native Iraqi press said that only the Americans could have allowed it due to security checkpoints and everything. And it was like, how can you allow this sectarianism to be created and even acknowledge that it's been orchestrated, if I make sense?
I think the
It's
mosque you're talking about is the Spiral Mosque. It's a Shia holy site, and I recall this, and a friend of mine recalls this, but there was actually a Western media report that, in fact, it was an American decision to bomb that mosque because, as they claimed, it was being used by snipers. And this kind of came out, very quietly, and now it's gone into the memory hole, and we can't really find this article anymore. But that was after the damage had already been done, and the Shias blamed the Sunnis, and some of them did. A lot of people in Iraq to this day realize what the plot is all about.
That's what I'm
But
getting at.
unfortunately, it just takes one person to turn a fake civil war into a real one. So that that spiral bombing, it's a very memorable one. Do you recall also in Basra where three British agents were
Yeah.
captured by Iraqi police, dressed
Yes.
up as Arabs?
Yes.
They had weapons, bombs in their car. They were shooting at Iraqi police, and the British tore down the entire police station just to get them back. And you can imagine how important these people were and what they might have been up to. Yes.
Have you heard that maybe they were Israelis?
I haven't heard that. Um, I